Hello and welcome to what I think is going to be a very exciting discussion, and I'm really proud and excited to have with me Josh Fox. I think many of you know Josh, not only from his celebrity status and the film work that he does, but for his commitment to doing everything possible to protect our planet for future generations. He's been one of the leading anti-fracking activists in this country and a real advocate for fundamental changes in our energy system. Josh, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Bernie. And I can't start any conversation with you without saying thank you so much for everything you've done for this country.
Mutual. Let's start off. There's a lot to go over, and I don't want to waste a whole lot of time discussing President Trump, but just say a few words about Trump's attitude toward climate change, to the environment, appointing Scott Pruitt to be the administrator of the EPA.
Well, this is absurd, obviously. Appointing an EPA administrator whose job it is to destroy the EPA, of course, is not the first time that this has happened. I think Ronald Reagan did that with Gorsuch. There is a Republican tradition of appointing heads of government to offices which they'd rather not exist. So, when Scott Pruitt is trying to dismantle, Environmental Protection Agency, that's his real job. And I think that obviously Donald Trump's attitude on climate change is unscientific, unfounded, absurd, crazy.
Other than that, it's not bad.
Other than that, it's fine. I mean, it's some of his own hotels down in Hollywood, Florida that are due to go underwater. Right. But it is amazing to me that with the scientific atmosphere that we have today, knowing that we have cell phones that have greater computational power than the initial computers that sent, Americans to the moon, that we doubt climate science. That's ridiculous.
Okay. There is, needless to say, a lot of unhappiness, a lot of despair. There are millions of people, not only in our own country, but all over the world, who know that we're fighting for our kids and our grandchildren and future generations. They are outraged by Trump's attitude, his appointments. In your view, what can the grassroots of this country do to stand up, fight back, and help transform our energy system away from fossil fuel?
Well, truly, Senator, this is a moment which is, you've got to understand, is completely unprecedented and strange. We have the Republicans in control of the House, the Senate, soon the Supreme Court, and of course Donald Trump is the president. At the same time, you have the most awake, active, outraged, participating population I've ever seen. That political revolution, which you coined, which brought together all the movements across America, is still very much functioning. So I want to ask you, obviously you've been through, decades of activism, and I'm very interested in Bernie Sanders, the leader, the activist. What do you think? Because I, for example, the day that Trump signed the presidential memorandum on the Dakota Access Pipeline, I got a memo, I got an email from somebody at 10 in the morning. By noon, we had decided we were going to do a rally at Trump Tower in New York City. By 6 o'clock, 5,000 people showed up in the freezing rain.
All right,
I've never seen anything like it.
I agree with you. We saw that especially on the Women's March, but we're seeing it in rallies against the repeal of the Affordable Care Act, for climate change, and a host of other areas. I think what we have to do is be extremely smart and effective in tapping that energy. And that means, among other things, understanding that we can combat climate change at the local level. My city does not receive, we do not use any electricity that comes from fossil fuel. That movement can continue all over this country. We have state governments trying to do the right thing. I just read today that some university withdrew funding from organizations that are involved in denial of climate change. So there is a lot of work that we can do because the truth is, every poll shows that more and more people are seeing with their own eyes. This is not kind of esoteric scientific debate. They're seeing lakes that don't freeze where they used to go ice fishing. They're seeing flooding, they're seeing drought. So the goal is for us to be smart, to be effective, to do everything we can at the local, state, and put as much pressure as we can on Trump and the Congress, I think.
But don't you think, though, that this is indicative of the fact that the system is indeed broken? Right.
Oh.
We have 75% of Americans want renewable energy, and we don't get it because we know we have an oligarchy, not a democracy at this moment.
No, that's exactly
We have people protesting all throughout. In fact, some states are going in the opposite direction, right? Governor Kasich in Ohio actually froze their renewable energy standards and rolled them back. In Florida, it's illegal to have a house that's off the grid. In Arizona, the sunniest place in the nation, $50 charge a month if you want to have solar panels on your roof. These are Koch brother initiatives.
Exactly.
And so that's why at the political level, I think you have to take those battles on.
Take them on. And I think as a nation, we should be standing up to what's going on in Arizona. You're right. This is one of the sunniest states in this country. To remain dependent upon fossil fuels is absolutely insane.
Right.
But that's my point. I think we've got to work at the statewide level, at the local level, and every level that we possibly can. Let me raise an issue, not raise it, but talk about something which I think has not gotten the kind of discussion that it deserves. That is the Solutions Project. Because it's one thing to say, to moan and to groan. It is another thing to say, okay, how do we move to an energy efficient and sustainable nation? Is it possible? And you'll hear many people representing the fossil fuel industry who tell us, well, check all the boxes and all that stuff with everything. But the truth of the matter is, and you've done some work on this, I'd like you to explain it to our audience,
sure, we
can move in a reasonably short period of time and break our dependence on fossil fuel. How do we do that?
Well,
what is the Solutions Project?
100% renewable energy is totally possible. It's possible in many, many different ways. So back in 2011, when we were fighting fracking in the state of New York, or 2010, Mark Ruffalo, the green superhero, and myself, we were trying to go to Governor Cuomo and say to him, look, actually what I said was, find me the best renewable energy plan for the state of New York. I want to see it so we can put this out in front of the governor and say you don't have to frack. Right. And lo and behold, my research team came back and they said, well, Josh, there is no renewable energy plan for the state of New York. I said, that's crazy. How could there not be one? Right. Because we've known for years that renewable energy, for example, the wind in just 3 states, North Dakota, Kansas, and Texas, just those 3 states could power everything in the United States of America, including our fleet of 300 million cars. We've known this for decades. So why was there no plan? Right. So Mark and I, we went out to California. We met with an incredible renewable energy scientist named Mark Jacobson at Stanford University. He was doing renewable energy planning for the whole world, for the whole nation. And we said, can you write us a plan for New York State? And he said, without a doubt, he combined with 2 Cornell scientists, Tony Ingraffia and Bob Howarth. And within a few weeks, they had a plan. And then a few months later, it was peer-reviewed. And we kept it quiet because we wanted to kind of give it to Governor Cuomo and wrap it up in a bow as a way to say, you don't have to frack. You don't have to do this. We can go down another path. And in fact, if you do go down the fracking path, you imperil New York City, you imperil our water supply, you imperil people's health. And this was the issue. So we proved that scientifically.
And what you ended up doing is not only coming up with a plan for New York State, right, but a plan for 49 other states as well, correct?
All 50 states. And then a whole number of countries now. So if you go to thesolutionsproject.org, you can go to the maps and you can see the breakdown of all the different renewable energy profiles. Offshore wind, onshore wind, solar panels.
Solutionsproject.org.
Thesolutionsproject.org.
Thesolutionsproject.org. And what they will do is give you the ammunition you need to tell your governor that, in fact, we can break our dependence on fossil fuel. We don't need to have fracking. We can move aggressively in terms of sustainable energy and energy efficiency.
But this is the key point, right? The Solutions Project is just a template. It's just the science. It means nothing without the activism. Right. It means nothing without the citizens' participation.
Well, let me go back.
It's like having the cure for cancer, but you don't have any doctors, right? The medicine that we need right now is activists in the streets saying we can do this, dispelling the lies of the fossil fuel industry.
You mentioned Governor Cuomo, New York State.
Yeah.
Talk about what you did there and what the results of that were.
Well, okay, so this is one of the most amazing grassroots movements in the history, I think, of the environment. What happened in New York, and by the way, the same movement on fracking exists all across this country. The fractivist movement is ferocious, passionate, enthusiastic. It's one of the fastest growing environmental movements that ever happened in the United States of America. The difference in New York was we had a state that did this very little known technique to develop a plan on fracking. It was called democracy. They allowed the people to weigh in on the crisis. So they had a scoping period. They had people weigh in on their concerns. That took a number of years. And over those years, the science kept coming in. You got to understand, when I made Gasland in 2010, driving around this country in a beat-up 92 Camry, sleeping on people's couches, no funding, nobody cared about this issue, nobody knew what fracking was. We had no science. We just had a bunch of people in Colorado and Wyoming and Pennsylvania saying, our water's turning black, we can light our water on fire, our animals are getting sick, our children are getting sick, we're surrounded by toxic chemicals in the atmosphere. There wasn't a lot of science on the issue at that point. So it took that 5-year review process that New York undertook to say, this is something different. That's an environmental impact study. That's what we asked for with Dakota Access Pipeline, which Trump just railroaded against. That's what Pennsylvania didn't do. Pennsylvania, Governor Ed Rendell and Tom Corbett rolled out the red carpet for the fracking industry. Texas did not do it. Oklahoma did not do it. Colorado did not do it. Places didn't give the citizens a chance to have input. So New York's fracking movement was ferocious. And
New York made a mistake. They allowed people to participate in the process.
They did something unusual for this United States. They used democracy. And that was the key element there, of course.
And then what happened? Once people
New York fractivists bird-dogged Governor Cuomo. He could not have a birthday party without 500 fractivists showing up outside the Plaza Hotel being like, Governor Cuomo, happy birthday, ban fracking. So this went on for years until finally the science manifested itself. And also a lot of local bans all across the state. So by the end of 5 years, all these townships had banned fracking. So when the governor looked at it and he said, well, we've got all this evidence on health. The state commissioner in New York said, my kids won't live next to it. I won't live next to it. No one in the state should live next to it. Fracking, period. And then they looked at the map and said, by the way, there's not that much territory left to frack. All these places have banned it. So a very strong local strategy helped that, and a very strong statewide and national strategy based on science.
So when we talk about what people can do, New York State in that campaign is a perfect example, yes?
It's a perfect example. But there has to be a legislative component. And in a lot of cases right now, we don't have that. So this is a big question. Look, I just came back from Standing Rock. I just made a film about there. It's coming out on Earth Day. I spent a lot of time with the water protectors who did everything right. They were in the water, up to the waist. You know what I mean? Talking to the police saying, we love you. We're praying for you. Please don't do this. And then they were brutalized, and they were maced, and they were shot at with rubber bullets, and they were arrested, and some of them are facing 10 years.
I know. I just met with some of them this morning, actually.
And so they did everything that we're supposed to do as civil disobedient, nonviolent, prayerful people. And as journalists were facing decades. My own producer was facing a 45-year jail term just for filming a protest. And luckily she got off. So I have to ask you, just from your long view over history, it's a tough time. People are feeling really demoralized. It's true. So how do you say, okay, in Chicago in the 60s, we watched my friends get beat up. I think we've made enormous progress. I think 2016 was the year America just rediscovered its revolutionary soul, and I think we have it strong right now. We're a nation of movements. The Black Lives Matter, No DAPL, fracking, climate, the women's movement, Fight for 15, single-payer health care, the Dreamers, these Occupy. We're a nation of movements versus the oligarchs, and the movements are getting stronger. But what do you say, Bernie Sanders, as the man who I saw chained, locked down in the civil rights movement, that very famous picture? What do you give us to help us move forward?
Well, I think you stated it. Where we are right now is we're in an unprecedented age. There has never been a president like Trump who lies all of the time, whose ignorance is appalling, whose right-wing agenda is disastrous. On the other hand, the point that you made is we are at the same exact moment having millions of people involved in grassroots struggle. So the main point that I would make is despair is not an option. I want people to remember that there was a time in this country where we had children working in factories, and workers stood up, fought back, got unions, got the end of child labor. 100 years ago, women did not have the right to vote, and millions of people, women and their male allies, fought back. Gay rights, I am old enough to remember that 20 or 30 years ago, it was not an issue that you even discussed publicly. Nobody in a million years would have dreamed that gay marriage would be legal today in 50 states in this country. The idea that we've had a black president after all of the racism and segregation that exists in this country. So the point is, yeah, these are tough times, no mistake about it. But anyone who says that we can't make change, we can't overcome this, doesn't know a damn thing about American history. Of course we can. And your point is well taken. We have now, all over this country, millions of people, working people, young people, prepared to stand up and fight back. We've got to coordinate that. We've got to be smart about how we go forward. And I think we've got to go forward at the local, state, federal level. But absolutely, there may yet be a silver lining out of this presidency. And that is Trump may bring all of us together.
Well, I mean, there are protest camps. I just brought up the list on my phone. You see, they shut down the one in North Dakota.
Right.
But Florice Whitebull, who is the subject of my film, who's an amazing spokesperson, she said, we're spreading like cotton seeds in the wind. You know, you've got protest camps in Texas, in Marfa, Texas, Live Oak, Florida, Osceola County, Florida, against the Sable Trail pipeline, against the Trans-Pecos pipeline, in Oklahoma against the Diamond pipeline, in New Jersey against the Pilgrim pipeline, in Lancaster, PA against the Atlantic Sunrise pipeline, you know, Iowa City against Dakota Access pipeline, soon I think in the Atchafalaya Basin in Louisiana against the Bayou Bridge pipeline. And of course, if it comes to that, in my backyard in the Delaware River Basin, against fracking. We're fighting fracking all over again. For those of you who've seen Gasland, that is rearing its ugly head again. We thought we'd beaten that, we won that battle. And I have to invite you, because obviously it's an area that's close to your heart. You know, that's Narrowsburg. You know, I live 5 miles from Narrowsburg.
I went to Boy Scout camp there.
I know you did. So
10 Mile River still in business?
Yes, well, I don't know if the camp is, but 10 Mile River is still there.
Yeah,
And it's
okay.
one of the most, if you haven't been to the upper Delaware River, it's one of the most beautiful national treasures, right? 5% of Americans drinking water out of that river basin, 16 million people. So you're invited back if you ever want to come for a stroll or a canoe trip, or if you ever get a day off. Okay. We may need you, though. But the truth is the fossil fuel industry is right now desperate. They're on the march, and they're trying to overturn the rule of law and the will of the people.
And let's understand, you're right, they are desperate and they are on the defensive. And even corporate America understands where the future is, because 2/3 of new energy investment, not going into coal, it's not going into oil, it's going into sustainable energy. We do have them on the run, and we just got to intensify that pressure.
Well, I understand you're going to West Virginia soon.
I'm going to West Virginia Sunday night.
Coal miners.
Well, I'm going to be talking to people in McDowell
right.
County, yeah,
Well, I
which
mean,
was strong coal country.
I'll bring up a project right now. It's called Coal River Mountain. There's a proposal to do wind farm on top of the mountain instead of blow the top off of it, right?
There you go.
So mountaintop removal, which is devastating for every possible implication. There is a proposal to put a wind farm up there, and this is what we have to do. We have to retrain those.
That's exactly, well, we have to invest in those communities that have been devastated. We don't hold coal miners responsible. Right. And our job is to make them whole. One of the areas, maybe we'll end on this because we're running out of time here, is obviously, in terms of climate change, there is no choice but to be extremely aggressive in transforming our energy system. We have to do that for the sake of the planet. Yeah. But on top of that, there are economic benefits as well.
Sure.
All right, say a little bit about
that. Well, at solutionsproject.org, you can see actually the saved health benefit, billions and billions of dollars in people not dying from fossil fuels.
And not getting ill because of all kinds of pollution.
And also, it's the fastest growing job sector. Okay. You can see all these permanent jobs from that. You know, look, it's like I said before, we have the cure for cancer. The truth is the medicine that we need right now is people in the streets, because the system is broken, because even Democrats, we're fighting Democrats. I've been fighting Democrats for the last, decade. Barack Obama was a very big fracking advocate. So was Hillary Clinton. We had this fight at the platform hearings. Bill McKibben and
thank you for your efforts there.
Well, honestly, it's our fate right now as progressives, because the truth of the matter is Donald Trump won, Hillary lost, but Bernie Sanders is the most popular political figure in America right now, and there's a reason for that, because you're saying things that are the truth. And I think that I have to ask you, for that continued leadership. You've been incredible in that way.
I will do everything I can, and you're doing fantastic. And I think the message for today is, yeah, things are tough. A, you don't have the option to throw your hands up in the air in despair because the stakes are too high for our country and the entire world. And second of all, and this is what Josh has been saying, all over this country, people are becoming more involved. People who've never been involved in politics before are standing up and fighting back. We can win this thing. And out of these dark days may come an America that all of us are going to be very proud of. Because we are not giving up our progressive vision, which includes a whole lot of things. Josh touched on some of them in terms of Medicare for all, but it certainly includes transforming our energy system in this country, leading the entire world, creating millions of jobs, cleaning up the planet. We can do this. We can do it. But we can't do it unless people get involved.
We have to demand
so
it.
That's the message. And Josh,
can I mention two rallies? There's
Yep.
the rally on April 29th, the People's Climate March here in D.C., right? That's going to be a big one. Obviously, continued efforts in the Delaware River Basin, March 15th, and I'll post on my page where these protest camps are, because they are amazing things of a totally different value system. People working together, people being resilient, generous, nonviolent, and I think, in the spirit of that political revolution that you're talking about.
All right. Hey, keep up the great work. Thanks a lot.
Thank you,
for being
Brian.
here.
It's a real pleasure.